So this one is a fun vintage find. If you see on the cover here, it actually came with 6 real Band-Aids. And it looks like it was sort of a promo for Band-Aids. It's called Dr. Dan, the Bandage Man, and it is a golden book. And this originally belonged to, it looked like Suzanne. So Suzanne, if this is your book, let me know. And then in here, it had a note from the publishers that talks about how much children loved Band-Aids. And so they thought up this idea, which is pretty stinking cute. So here we are. Dan is a busy fellow. He is always on the go. But one day in a big backyard cowboy fight, he fell and scratched his finger on his make-believe gun. And what do you think the big cowboy did? He cried, "Boo-hoo-hoo," Dan cried, and he ran in the house to his mother. Now his mother was always glad to see Dan, but a cowboy crying, how could that be? "Why, that's nothing to cry over," Mother said when she saw the bright red spot. "We'll wash it clean with soap and water and bandage it up, and it will be better than new." And quick as a wink it was. Back went Dan to the cowboy fight, and all the boys gathered around to see his new clean bandage too. Before the cowboy game was over, it was almost supper time. Dan saw his dad climbing out of the car. He ran so fast to meet him that his feet tangled up and he fell down, ker-plunk. One knee was skinned through his cowboy suit. But do you think Dan cried? No, sir, not this time. "I know what to do for this," he said, when his dad came to take a look. "We'll wash it clean and bandage it up, and it will be better than new." And quick as 2 winks it was, and here was Dan with 2 bandages on. Next day, Dan hitched up Spotty, his pup, to take his sister Carly's doll for a ride. But Spotty saw a cat and he wanted to chase, and he forgot all about that doll. Lickety-split, Spotty started off. The wagon tipped over, the doll tumbled out, and Carly started to cry. "My baby hurt herself," because the doll had a bump on her head. "This is nothing to cry over," said Brother Dan. "I know just what to do." So he led Spotty and Carly into the house, and he carried the hurt little doll himself with a rather bad bump on her head. "We'll wash it clean," said Dan, and he did. "We'll bandage it up," and he did that too. He pulled out the little string on the bandage wrap. He picked the bandage out and held the 2 stiff pieces, and zip, that bandage was on the doll's head. "There," smiled Dan, "she's better than new." "Now," said Carly, "I want one too." "Are you hurt?" asked Dan. "I don't know," Carly said, looking for a scratch, and sure enough, she found one. It was a very tiny scratch and rather old, but it was scratched just the same. Dan washed it clean and bandaged it up. "Thank you," said Carly, "it's better than new." "Woof," said Spotty, and held up his paw. Dan laughed. "I guess you must want a bandage too," so he put one on Spotty's paw. Next day, Daddy was home from work. He went out to mow the lawn, and what do you think? He cut his finger on a slippery, sharp lawnmower blade. "Let me fix you up, Dad," said Dan. "I know what to do. We'll wash your finger clean and bandage it up, and it will be better than new." Dad looked surprised, but he followed Dan, and soon Dad wore a bandage too. "You're a handy fellow to have around," said Dad, and he shook Dan's hand. "I have a new name for you. We'll call you Dr. Dan the Bandage Man." And they do to this day. So we will too. The end. So as you can see, lots of things change between now and 1950, but children's love of Band-Aids really hasn't. The end.